Alrighty, good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's session, The Power of One, Building a Harmonized Content Strategy with Mars Inc. This is the fifth session of the Product Content Countdown webinar series hosted by One World Inc. And a few housekeeping notes before we begin introductions and commence the discussion. This session is being recorded, and all registrants will receive a link to the recording later today. We will also be taking questions throughout this session. So if you have a question during the discussion or during the Q&A portion, please submit those questions via the Q&A or chat panel at the bottom of your screen. So with that, let's introduce our today's panelists. We are joined by TJ Waldorf, Chief Marketing Officer at One World Inc., and Joyce Ann Rosenfield from Mars Inc. And apologies, my screen was not sharing. TJ, quick feedback. Is my screen sharing?
We see the title slide. And for everybody, just props to Scott because he's having internet issues at his house. So he scrambled to a Starbucks and he's sitting outside. So thank you, Scott, for running this. If you go down to the left and just click to the next one, there we go.
Awesome. All right, TJ, I'll hand it off to you. And Joyce, thank you so much for joining us. TJ?
Cool. Yeah, so I made Scott actually make a last minute change to this slide, Joyce Ann, and I don't even think I told you, which is you were going to be talking about this, this road to harmony, so to speak, and how, you and your team at Mars have been kind of on this journey to harmonize the various teams that are touching data and content across the organization. But I put this quote that you said to me on one of our previous calls, which is teams might be siloed, but data and content shouldn't be. And I think that's a really good kind of soundbite to frame up this entire discussion today. So text Scott last night and said, hey, can you throw this in there? So he did that. Thank you, Scott. Scott, you want to click one more time here? So as we go through the conversation today, some of the things that will just kind of keep top of mind are, how Joyce Ann, you and your team at Mars are really making sure that you're keeping content consistent and accurate, how you're creating efficiency across the different teams and, removing any sort of bottlenecks. And then I think most importantly, how are you bringing the various stakeholders, the different people from the different teams together to really unify how all this stuff works, right? And so I think that's kind of the foundation of everything that we'll talk about today. So I want to actually start with that quote, and maybe you can kind of just kick things off there. But when you think about the teams that might be siloed, but that are touching data and content, how's Mars been on this journey to kind of bring that together?
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to be here. And it really has been a journey, keying in on the word journey. It's a continuous journey. It's one that started for us, 8-10 years ago. But I say continual because you never want to stop that journey. So it actually started with a call from Walmart, and they wanted to know why we had different data that they got sent in 2 different ways. And I was like, what are you talking about? Our data should be consistent. And I took that as a challenge. I said, you know what, give me a few days. Let me really see what's going on. And much to my surprise, we were actually more siloed as a business than I ever imagined. An e-commerce team had come about. This was at the very early days of e-commerce. And this team was just manually typing data away, sending it off to customers. And I quickly realized that we can't have this. So one of the first things we did is we stepped back and we started looking sort of throughout the entire organization. Who needs what type of data? And that was the first question we sort of asked ourselves, because I said, I can't start breaking down the silos until I even identify who's in what silos and what silos exist. And much to my surprise, there were more silos than I even realized. There was a master data team that was supposedly responsible for all the data, but you had sales getting their data from one source, e-commerce or e-commerce getting their data from another source, data synchronization getting their data from another source. So it was that moment where the light bulb came on and said, aha, although our teams are siloed, we need to find a way to ensure that our data isn't siloed. And with that, we went on a journey. The journey took us a couple of years, actually. And what we did was we said, okay, First, we have to identify what should the source of truth be for each one of our data points, realizing that each data point might have a source of truth in different systems. Then once we identified the source of truth for those data points, we carefully, architectured our system, realizing that we were going to have more than one system. We said, okay, we need to make sure that we now map out our data points. So that way our systems are carefully slave and mastered together to ensure that wherever that data point source of truth should be, it should never get overridden by another system. And with that, we took the journey. And now we are confident that regardless of how somebody's going to get data from Mars, whether it's a fact sheet from sales, whether it's a GDSN customer, whether it's a online e-commerce customer that doesn't do GDSN, they're going to get that same data because we've mapped it all together. So it was really that journey that got us to a point where we're now confident, regardless of how you get our data, it's all going to be the same. It took us a couple of years to get there. I'm not going to lie. It wasn't easy. It was really, the first cue is educating our business because the silos didn't realize they were siloed. They thought they were using the same data as everybody else. So it's taking a step back, educating each other about all those different silos we found and saying, okay, how can we come together as one voice for Mars? We don't want an e-commerce team, a data sync team, and a sales team. We want a Mars team. So that was really that aha moment and the way that we started that journey.
No, that's awesome. And is that something like, did, somebody in senior leadership come down and say, hey, Joyce Ann, this is something that we really want you to do? Or is this something that you kind of saw with that call from Walmart and said, hey, I'm going to kind of take the lead on this because I know, what we need to do?
So believe it or not, it was my idea. I said, you know what? I said, it only takes one person to make a difference in a company. And one of the things about Mars, we are still privately family owned. And they ask us as associates to act as if it was your own business. So I said, if this was my business, what would I do? I said, I'm going to make a difference here. So I actually worked bottom up at this point, starting to connect with those higher presidents, vice presidents in those different groups to let them know about the problem. And said, you know what? I have a way to fix this, but I need everybody's support that when we put this fix in place, we're going to keep it fixed. So it was a bottom up approach. And it really shows how one person with an idea within an organization when it comes to data can make a big difference.
Yeah, that's huge. And I think there's maybe a misconception in some organizations where if you sit in let's call it the master data team or data governance or whatever it might be, that like, that's my slice of this data and content, environment or arena. But the way that you thought about it is data's everywhere, content's everywhere, but how do we bring it together? So who are some of those other stakeholders across the different teams that you've kind of brought along with you? I know that the digital team's one that we've had conversations about, but who are some of the others?
So one of the biggest things we took from that is we started a campaign saying there's no I in data. There's no one person responsible for data. It's everyone's responsibility. If a piece of data passes your desk and you know it's wrong, don't just let it go. Stop, raise the flag, question it, make the change. So the different groups that we actually worked with really span the entire organization. So we said, yes, our master data team might be the one entering it into the system, but they're not actually the one responsible for creating it. They're just entering something that they were handed. So with that, we partnered with marketing, activity management, sales, R&D, e-commerce, and even customer care, because we wanted to make sure that customer care had the same data that sales had the same data that e-commerce had. And with that, we really opened it up with education discussions about the importance of data and really trying to educate each person that you don't want to just continually pass bad data. You want to stop, you want to question the validity of something if it doesn't feel right. Sort of like, in the airport, see something, say something. We took that same approach with data. If something doesn't smell right, feel right, it's okay to question it. Maybe it is right, but maybe it's not. So really tried to get everybody across the organization in their pillar to say, you know what? If I don't understand it or if it doesn't seem right, I'm going to at least raise the question. And I'll be honest, it's still hard and it's still a journey that we're on because nobody within an organization seems to want to take data ownership for specific attributes. There's a lot of finger pointing. So I'm sure there's a lot of you guys out there sitting there going, man, I wish I could get somebody to see something, say something. It's not something that's going to happen right away. And really continuing that education piece and diving into why it's so important to identify data owners is really that started getting there.
Yeah. And there's the accuracy piece, the consistency piece, but then when you think of data or these other types of content, you're even thinking, user generated content, ratings and reviews. How can, certain tools and approaches be helpful to the digital team? Or I think you've had conversations around analytics, right? And those areas of expertise may not typically sit within a master data team, right? But you're thinking kind of beyond that.
Right. And that's actually one of the keys. I'm really glad you brought that up, TJ, is that historically, when you say the word data, people think of that, I'll call it the heavy things, the weights, the dimensions, the GTINs, the barcodes, and the hierarchy. But what we've transformed at Mars is the word data means so much more. That was the old data, the bare minimum. But data now is really everything soup to nuts. It's the data that we need to transport products from our factories to our warehouses, transport those products from our warehouses to our customers or our consumers. But also, it's how do we get them the data they need to show up online so that our products are truly representative of what we want. So it's imaging, it's nutritional, it's the ratings, it's the reviews, it's ensuring that everywhere our product is showing up online and physical shelf, that the data is coming from Mars, because we don't want somebody to talk about our product in a way they want. We want it displayed and shown and marketed the way that we see it and the way that we desire. So the term data has really grown to an all-encompassing term that now talks about hundreds, if not thousands of data attribution points. And also, it's not just from us to them. As TJ said, it's the ratings, it's the reviews, it's the keywords, it's the search terms, it's the analytics. So that really spans even additional silos for expertise and ensuring that those folks understand the data journey as well.
Yeah. And, you kind of talked about like how this all started for you at Mars. But if, folks on the call are wondering, like, this all sounds great, but like, what is a tactical, how do I start this or initiate this process within my organization, big or small?
Big or small. So one of the first things I'd say that really is key to that is, don't go into it thinking your data is perfect. Go into it with a exercise of, let me see where my data truly sits. We started about 10 years ago thinking we had great data accuracy. And we started with weights and dimensions. And we said, let's make sure the data is accurate. And when we actually did physical audits, we actually found out that our data was wrong more than it was right. We were only about 46% accurate on those key attributes of weights, dimensions, and barcodes. So it was truly eye-opening for us as an organization. And I think that's really that first step. You have to be honest with yourself about the health of your basic data. So we worked for a couple of years to get our data accuracy up to 95 to 100% on the weights and dimensions piece. And then we started layering things on, knowing that you can't go after everything at once. So then it was, okay, now that we've got the basic attribution correct, how do we go to that next level of imaging and nutritional? How do we make sure that's 100% accurate? And really, it came down to working with some of our key customers that had amazing scorecards, and it helped us find the holes within our own data. So it was really building strong partnerships between manufacturers, suppliers, retailers that really helped Mars, hone into on what was most important to our customers. So that way it helped us, take that next step on where we were going to give the most value to our customers. So the biggest thing is start small, but be ready to find the unexpected. And when you do find something that, isn't beautiful, don't run away. Take it as an opportunity to really make your business better. So again, we started small and we keep building. So now that we're done with imaging and nutritional and we know we have a good plan, now it's how do we become stronger in rating? How do we become stronger in reviews? How do we know what's out there using great systems and tools like One World Sync has with the data scraping, with the, I think it's that e-commerce platform? And how do we really ensure we're showing up? And this is why it's a continual evolution, because you'll get through one set of attributes and then all of a sudden something new will be important. So FSMA is coming. So who knows what that's going to bring? So again, that's why I said in the beginning, it's a continual journey. It had a defined beginning, but there is no defined end because it's something you should continually do as a business. So, the biggest recommendation is start small, start with the core, and then work your way out. And know that it's going to take time. And just remember, underpin that with education as you're coming across challenges or folks within your business saying, why doesn't this matter? Find ways to talk about data both within the GS1 standards, but also outside of the GS1 standards. How do these data changes or attributions or rules impact the core principles of your business? So I'll give one example. We know gross weight as a wonderful GDSN standard. It's all over, the standards area. But when we talk internally to our business, we don't necessarily say, hey, you're breaking the GS1 standard. That's why you have to fix your gross weight. We talk about things such as, when gross weight is wrong, our logistics is inefficient.
Yeah.
And then when our logistics is inefficient, we can't measure the proper tonnage for our items because that comes from gross weight. When we can't measure the proper tonnage, we actually don't know what our carbon footprint is. So we tie the underpinning of data to larger corporate goals and how those things can support together. And that's how we really gathered that momentum as we kept on that stepping stone.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. You're tying everything back to a bigger outcome, right? Like that's the name of it. I want to highlight one thing that you said, and then we'll talk about some other do's and don'ts that maybe you'll give advice to the audience with. You said, you do this assessment to make sure that what's, showing up online, let's say, is actually Mars content. And if you're not doing that, like there are situations, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, where if a retailer is lacking images or other content, they're going to grab whatever they can find, and they're going to use that for your business, right? And so I just think that was important to highlight, that you are really making sure that everything that's showing up online is from you, right?
Right. And that's really important because we want to ensure that, if a consumer is making a purchase off the web, that when they receive that product, it's the exact one that they're expecting. And, it is challenging as a CPG industry that's very seasonal in nature, making sure that your imagery, if any packaging changes, does have a whole set of challenges. And it's really, narrowing down the timings of your releases, when you're going to update the data, to really ensure at the end of the day that the consumer has the best experience possible. And that's why we want to be in charge of the data ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. Some other do's and don'ts, like are there, traps that people need to avoid? I know you mentioned a little bit about like, don't do it all at once. Maybe you can start there and talk about what you've learned from that.
Yeah. So do's and don'ts. The biggest do I can say is, or say it's a don't and a do. Don't wait. Do dive in right away, because any small change you make will have a ripple effect. Don't wait until it's, perfect, because perfect really doesn't exist. The one thing we like to say at Mars is the only constant is change. So our world, our technology, our customers, our consumers are constantly changing. So one of the biggest do's I'd say is, try to live in a sprint and agile type of mindset and environment. Chunk it off into small, tangible pieces, because then your customers and consumers will see, hey, we've been heard, they've made some adjustments, and they're going to continue to get better. We like to call them MVPs, minimal viable products. If we wait forever to put out the next great solution or an update that is fully encompassing, we may never get there because the targets are constantly changing. So we launch lots of MVPs in this area, so that way we can start making progress. So that's one of my biggest do's, is like, do jump in, do it sprint, be agile, and just get in there. The biggest don't is don't try to tackle it all at once. I tried that in the beginning, and after a couple months, I realized I wasn't getting anywhere. I would get 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, and I said, okay, I can't do this all at once because everything's constantly changing. Whether it was our internal systems were changing, our customers' trading partner requirements were changing, major release had come along and was changing attribution, and it really became difficult. Another, big do that I would say, if we're talking about do's and don'ts, is do really talk to sales, talk to your counterparts. Because if you don't maybe have a contact with that customer, I'm sure your sales team does. And sales, more often than not, is getting feedback about data in their customer conversations. And it's not where they want to be. They want to be talking about growing the business, growing the category. So a lot of times sales can actually provide you a lot of insights into what's stopping them from being able to have those conversations. They may not think to bring it to you, but if you go to them and say, hey, what's handcuffing you in your customer meetings? Is there anything data related you're hearing? It's really good to open that dialogue. It was one of the ways that myself at Mars really also, figured out how to prioritize because there was so much to do. We partnered closely with sales, and the partnership there also helps elevate the need of data. From a Mars Wrigley perspective, we sit in the Mars Global Services business now. So we're a service organization. And we can tell the business all you want. You need to fix this, you need to fix this, you need to fix this. But when you have your other counterparts that are within that same business putting pressure on their peers, you're going to see change happen quicker.
Right. 100%. Well, and again, that goes back to like, you're not waiting for, let's say, sales to come to you to ask for something. You're going and saying, here's how I think we can help you do your job, which is to sell more and grow the business. Right.
Yeah, exactly. It's a proactive ask. Usually if I'm going to go to sales with a request, I usually try to take to them a solution at the same time. And that's how you really build that mutually beneficial partnership. So I'll give you an example from just a few periods ago or a few months ago. I went to sales and said, hey, we need some support. We're having some problems in our R&D landscape. Oh, by the way, One WorldSync has this new great tool. Let me introduce you because I think it's going to help you sell more. So they were excited because we weren't coming to them with just problems, but also solutions on how to help them. So that's a really great way to continually grow your partnerships within your own business, which then naturally breaks those silos down. Right. Because next time there's a problem or an opportunity, they're going to say, oh yeah, Joyce Ann came to me. So, let me take this to her. Maybe she's got a solution already.
Yep. So one more question, then we'll go to, hopefully there's a bunch of Q&A teed up for us. But, what are you most excited about? Like, as you continue on this journey, as you bring, new team members and new stakeholders and, tools and technology, what are you most excited about?
So I think what I'm most excited about, so I've been in the GDSN arena for 16 of my 18-year career at Mars. And what really excites me is that it never gets boring. And it excites me because you just have to embrace the change. And you're always going to have the opportunity to learn something new, impact a new technology, and you have the opportunity to be an agent for change within your organization. And that to me is really exciting. Embracing the technology that's coming with, AI and just the speed of technology. It excites me because what I'm doing today is probably not what I'm going to be doing a year from now, even though I'm going to be in that same role. So I'm excited about the opportunities that we all have in front of us to really help drive data in the industry. Everyone says data isn't sexy, but one of these days, data is going to be considered sexy because businesses are going to realize that without data, they're not going to be able to hit their top goals. So that's what excites me is that, we're making it more and more of a use case for the business to care about.
I think you just gave me and Scott our next campaign idea, bringing the sexy back to data.
I love it.
Awesome. All right, Scott, do you want to go pull the slides back up and then we'll go to Q&A here? So if anybody wants to connect with me, probably less me, more so Joyce Ann, email address is there. Scott, what questions do we have teed up for Joyce Ann?
Yep, got some great questions submitted, and thank you everyone for submitting those. First one, since Mars recently acquired Kellogg or Kellanova, I believe, from Kellogg, how do you align the data for consistency to ensure the acquisition runs smoothly from a data standpoint?
So Joyce Ann, can I say something just real quick? This was the one thing that I promised we wouldn't talk about. So we didn't ask it, but somebody did. So you can defer or you can answer that however you want.
So unfortunately, I'm not at liberty to talk about anything with the acquisition of Kellanova. We are, everybody's seen the press releases. That's as much as I know. So maybe, come back to me with that question sometime next year and I'll be able to answer it.
Cool.
Let's see. For Joyce Ann, so you talked about doing those audits and you found like only 46% of the data was accurate. What metrics and tools do you use to measure that success?
Sure. So we've actually built an in-house auditing process where we take our data in SAP and we compare it to what we physically audit. And then we keep some stringent KPIs. We actually measure our data accuracy in multiple ways. We look at accuracy we find from the audit. So as, physically produced versus our data stream. We look at data accuracy around, data first time right. So are we catching the problem before the product is physically produced? And then the third type of data issue that we measure is the one we hate to have, but did it get outside of our walls? Did our customer come to us and tell us about a problem we didn't know about? So we take all three of those measures and roll them up into KPIs that get visibility throughout our organization. We also tie them back to not only the types of errors, but the groups that are responsible for root causing and fixing the errors. We dive in a little deeper too. We'll take it by brand, we'll take it by seasonality, but we do have lots of different views to help the business understand sort of where our Achilles heel is at the moment and how we correct it for the long term.
Awesome. Thank you. Another one, this one's from Brianna. How do you address attributes a customer might require, but Mars does not capture internally or consider mandatory?
So we take that on every time we bring on a new customer. We do what we call an attribute gap analysis, and we look at what the customer considers mandatory, optional versus what Mars supports. And we start out that relationship with the customer going through that gap analysis and explain, we are excited. We want to, data sync with you. Currently, we can meet this subset of attributes. And then, if there are any that fall into that gap that we don't support, we really have that open, frank conversation with them when they start business with us. And we look at how many other customers are looking for those same attributes. If it's only one attribute or one customer, a lot of times we then leave that to sales to top off as a truly customer specific attribute. But if we start to see that similar attribute ranging across multiple customer requests, then we get it into our pipeline for our future enhancements. And we start looking who in our business has that data, how do we integrate it into our system to ensure that it's coming from that source of truth and we get it mapped in properly. And then we would do a release of that data and correct it out to all of our customers using the correction message. And it really is a case by case basis. We've never had a customer say to us, we don't want to data sync with you because you don't have this one attribute. We have had instances where existing customers have turned on what they consider mandatory attributes without us knowing. And then it becomes a little bit of a firefight. We usually work with that customer to figure out what we can do, short term, medium term, long term to solve that problem.
Awesome. Let's see, we've got a couple more. In terms of getting buy-in from those counterparts and stakeholders, I guess at the enterprise level, what was that process? Were you reaching out to, one-to-one to other teams? Was it internal newsletters, email threads, town halls, et cetera? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
So it changed. I'll give you a sort of a two-piece answer. So pre-COVID, when we were all in the offices, a lot of times I would like to call it a drive-by. I'd walk up to their desk, I'd schedule a meeting. We'd sit down and have those conversations in person because I felt like it was a lot easier to corner someone in person. They couldn't get away from you. Post-COVID, we take a similar approach, but a lot more of it is, digitally online through Teams channels, or if we're in the office, we still do meet in the office. In some cases, it was whole teams that support attribution, but I'll use nutritional and allergen as an example. So when we wanted to start incorporating that into our data sync environment, we went to serve our head of regulatory and said, okay, here's what we're looking to do. Who's the right point person on your team? So we'll usually start with a director level or a VP level, depending on the size and scope. Meat, allergens, and ingredients was pretty big. So we started with the head of regulatory. And then we'll get them to assign us a point person that we can work with. So that way it's not just us saying, hey, we need your time, but it's already aligned with their manager that they need to support this. So we try to sell it in, I'm not going to call it total top, but somewhat high level down. We don't start with the president, but we work with, either those people's managers or managers' manager, depending on the size and scope of the project.
Yeah, makes sense. Scott, we have probably time for one more question.
Let's see. Okay, last one. Who was your biggest champion on your journey and how did they help to remove any impediments or roadblocks on your journey?
Oh, who is our biggest champion? Well, that's a good question. Well, no, there's been different champions at different points during the process. So I probably would have to say our biggest champion overall has been our sales counterpart because they're the ones getting the pressure from the customer. So whether it was funding, like when we needed funding to buy a Cuba scan to start the audit, we actually got that funded through sales because they understood how it directly affected their customers. So I guess I'd have to say sales has been the biggest counterpart because they feel the pressure like we do directly from the customer.
Makes sense.
Okay, awesome. Well, yeah, thank you, Joyce and TJ for the Q&A session. TJ, before we sign off, I just wanted to give a quick note to everyone in the audience. My slide will work. So for the 6th session of our product content webinar series, countdown webinar series, our next session will be on September 5th with Ajinomoto. It's going to be a tale of 2 processes, a before and after study. So you got the Q&A or the QR code there, and then we'll also send a link to the invite later today. And then TJ, I'll hand it to you for signing off.
Yeah, I'll just highlight one other Joyce Ann quote, which was "There's no I in data." So I'm going to use that too. And then I took some candy out of my son's cupboard this morning. So we got your Mars confectionery. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. And yeah, if you have any other questions, feel free to follow up directly at hello@oneworldsync.com.
And thanks for having me, TJ.
Yeah, thanks, Joyce Ann.